Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, if you're a Barnes & Noble customer, we've got a story that you need to hear. How an aviation blogger cracked the TSA barcode scheme and the major flaw found in the Linux kernel, plus a big batch of your questions and our answers. All that and a heck of a lot more in this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly systems network and administration podcast. This is episode 81, and we streamed it live on October 25th, 2012. This episode's brought to you by GoDaddy.com, and we'll tell you more about them as the show goes on. And the live stream is powered by the incredible ScaleEngine.com. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan. Welcome back.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Hey, man. Welcome back from Euro BSDCon. How was it?
It was amazing.
I mean, I've seen pictures of beer on your Google Plus page, so I'm assuming the good times were had.
Well, I didn't drink, but there was many good times were had.
I saw...
The social event was amazing. They really outdid themselves, and the food was crazy good.
I got to say, though, it looked like there was a pretty good attendance, and the talks looked pretty compelling.
Yes, it was all very good.
Yeah, you've got some pretty photogenic pictures of you looking like you're in charge up there, giving pretty good presentations. You look like you're owning it.
There were quite a few people came to our talk, which is good to see.
Good. What was it on?
Ours was it was about the global server load balancer technology that ScaleEngine uses.
That sounds.
Which is built all out of open source stuff.
So let me ask you a question, because I've noticed this when I go to conferences. I'm seeing a lot of Macs, and it's always funny because I go to Linux events and I see a lot of Macs, and now you're at a BSD event. Seen a lot of Macs. Did you notice more Macs than regular PCs?
Not more than regular, but there were a lot of Macs. A lot of that has to do with they have very consistent hardware, so and popular hardware, so that's much more supported hardware, right? Mm.
Well, and a lot of OS X uses, parts of BSD, so
right. So a lot of the people, even if they have a Mac, aren't necessarily running the Mac OS on it.
Oh.
A lot of people are running BSD on it just because it's consistent hardware that's going to work. But yes, some people were using OS X as well.
So if I wanted to, could I catch your talk online anywhere, or was it not recorded?
They were recorded, and they should be posted online in a couple of weeks.
Oh, okay.
They have to be edited and so forth. But They did it. It was very nice. They had, I think, multiple cameras. I think one on the slides and one on the presenters. And mics, and even like passing mics to people when they're asking questions, which is something that they don't always do at conferences. And then you just hear some mumbling, and then the guy answers a question, but you don't know what the question was. Mm-hmm. But it looked like very well produced. So I'm looking forward to seeing those videos and catching a couple of the talks that I missed.
Well, I've caught a few of your stories either on Google Plus or in the chat room, and it looks like it was a lot of fun. I really yes. wish I could have gone. That sounds like my kind of event. And there was copious amounts of beer drinking.
Yes.
I could have drinking your share for you. I could have done that.
There you go.
Next time I tag along, I'll try to drink your share of beer. If you ever come up to Linux Fest, they have a couple of breweries right there in the town, and they're going crazy right when Linux Fest happens. It's some of the best beer you'll ever have. So I'll drink your share then, and I'll just tell you how good it is. And
there you go.
We'll go good.
Sounds good.
Well, Alan, guess what? We have a substantial show today. A lot coming up. There's so much to cover since we've done a show. Plus, we got a ton of your emails. We'll be getting to all of that. But before we go into our first story this week, I want to remind folks that 'tis the season to do a little shopping, and it would mean a lot to us if before you do that shopping, you stop by JupiterBroadcasting.com and you use our affiliate links at the bottom of our website. We have them down there for Amazon, and we have them for eBay now, brand new one, and Netflix and Newegg and ThinkGeek and Best Buy. And Netflix is great because you can electronically send somebody a gift at the last minute. We've also got our extensions that'll add even support for affiliate sites that aren't listed there. And then you don't have to think about it either. And this, honestly, this is we're hoping is a great time for folks to support us, because hopefully the general population shopping will be up a little higher than average, and we can make up for some lost income over the year and sort of save it up. And you never know. You never know. I have a few ideas in mind, one of which is a website redesign that I'd love to start the process of, but we have to have revenue in order to do that. So please consider supporting Jupiter Broadcasting and using our affiliate links or our browser extensions. Or folks that contribute directly to that is very much appreciated. And you can find how to find out how to do that over jupiterbroadcasting.com/support. And then you just know exactly how much you're contributing to us every single month. And we really appreciate that. All right, Alan, now with all of that stuff, should we jump into our first story this week?
Yes, we have a bunch of big stories.
Yeah, we do. This one looks like a doozy. Tell me about it.
Okay, so Barnes & Noble, which is a brick-and-mortar bookstore, but they also have their own e-reader called the Nook and so on. The point-of-sales terminals that they use, a bunch of them were compromised, and potentially some people's debit card numbers and PIN numbers were stolen.
Oh.
So Barnes & Noble discovered on September 14th that a number of the PIN pads for their point-of-sale systems had been compromised. They didn't go public with the information about the breach right away because they were requested by investigators from the government to keep it under wraps while they investigated, hoping to not tip off the people that had compromised the PIN pads right away, so that they wouldn't, go delete all the evidence before the government could collect it. So basically, they found PIN pads that had been tampered with at 63 different stores spread all over the country, including California, Connecticut, Florida, Illinois, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and Rhode Island. So on September 14th, when they discovered this, they disconnected all of the PIN pads at all 700 of their stores.
Jeez.
And then they went through them all one by one and found that only about 1% of them had been tampered with. But, that was still 63 devices.
Wow. I mean, gosh, what a hectic mess that must have been.
Yeah. So it appears to basically have been a coordinated criminal enterprise to infect the PIN pads with a malware that would record the credit card numbers and the debit card numbers when you swipe them, and the PIN number if you entered one. And then, with the debit card and the PIN number, it's fairly easy to do a spoofed card and, withdraw cash from an ATM.
Mm-hmm.
Unless the card has a chip on it, but there's flaws with that as well, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago. So Barnes & Noble recommends that if you made a purchase there with a debit card, that you should change your debit card PIN number, just in case. And that'll prevent them from being able to use the information that they captured. And also to watch your debit and credit card accounts for any unauthorized transactions, and if you find those, to report them to your bank.
Wow, I'm looking at their press release here. They have a list of all the stores, and geez, this stuff really sucks too, because as the holiday season does approach, people start shopping more and more. So more people than normal could be affected by this kind of stuff. And
yep,
man, at least they caught it before the holiday rush really hit.
Yeah, and so far there's no reports of this actually being used against anyone. But and also they pointed out that if you bought stuff online or with your Nook or anything like that, those weren't compromised.
Right, yeah.
It wasn't their database that was compromised or anything. It was the physical card readers having malware put on them. And,
we hear a lot about different ways to exploit those physical readers, but I always think of them as such low-tech devices that I don't often think of malware. So are these like XP embedded type point-of-sale devices?
I think the malware is more sophisticated than that. Because I'm pretty sure, it's like an embedded system that's not running a standard OS.
Right. So that's something that maybe was targeted.
Yeah. And it seems like it would almost have to have been done by the company that services the point-of-sale system. Or rather, a contractor for the company that services the point-of-sale system.
Right. Somebody that has a little inside knowledge of how they work, where to find software to do that kind of thing, and how to do it.
And, access to tamper with the device at the store, right?
Yeah, right.
Random people can't walk up and start tampering with it. It would have to be when they service it or something.
It's not like somebody's browsing the web on it.
There's not any details on exactly what happened, but
okay.
It's interesting to see that kind of thing happening and to know what might be going down.
Well, and I think it's also interesting, too, that investigators asked them to hold off. There's been a few things like that recently where investigators asked them to not release it right away as they sort of try to figure things out.
If you can catch the guys coming back to pick up the data, then that would be optimal.
Mm-hmm. Now, should we move on to our next story?
Yep.
All right. So this next story sounds like one that is one of those roll this out for Cybersecurity Awareness Month, but I'll hold the skepticism until you're done with it. What's going on?
Okay. So an aviation blogger, so it's just a guy that blogs about the fact that he has to fly all over the place or whatever, found that he could, by reading the barcode on his boarding pass, determine whether he was tagged, randomly selected for regular screening or the faster pre-screening.
That makes total sense. Of course there must be a system there, right?
Right. The issue is that anyone can tell by reading the barcode. The barcode doesn't contain like it's not encrypted or anything. It's just by reading the barcode with your cell phone, you can tell whether you're going to go through the regular screening or the fast screening.
So you're saying they're making an app for that? You actually, I mean, that would be great. I
don't know, but it's a huge security flaw.
Yeah, well, and it also shows you that they can come up with these complex systems for screening, and then it comes down to, well, we have to pass the information between these primitive systems, and barcode is the best way to do that in this barcode.
Right, and the barcode's fine if it's encrypted or at least obfuscated in some way so that random person can't look at the barcode and tell.
Oh, he's a terrorist. He's a terrorist.
So anyway, he wrote on his blog that he was able to determine what level of security screening he was going to be subjected to from the boarding pass, which he can print up to 24 hours before his flight.
Oh.
Right? So he knows before he even gets to the airport whether he's going to go through the regular screening or the fast screening.
So if I'm a terrorist and I know I got that, I don't even show up. I don't even bother.
Or rather, the possibility that a terrorist or a smuggling group would buy multiple tickets, then check each one and only use the ones that get the fast screening.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
So the barcode also appears to lack any form of a MAC or message authentication code, meaning that it might be possible to modify the barcode to change your boarding pass to get you the fast screening. Although it's unclear if modifying the barcode would work, or, are they just reading the barcode and trusting it, or is the barcode like a serial number that's matched up to a database and they would detect, hey, this isn't a valid barcode?
I would think so, right?
It's hard to say because it's illegal under U.S. law to tamper or alter your boarding pass, so no one was able to test it to see. But the vulnerability appears to have been confirmed by reading the specifications for the barcode system published by the IATA, the International Air Transport Authority. So, they published the spec on how this barcode system works so that different airports and airlines can implement it. And it seems right in the spec to say that that's how it works. But every airport I've ever been through, and I have a list of 6 different airports that I've gone through recently, has not had any way to avoid the regular screening process. What we're talking about here by the reduced screening is not having to take off your belt, not having to take your laptop out of your bag or take off your shoes, and it's just the quick scan basically. But I've never seen that anywhere, although I've never actually been to the States. But I've been through 3 different airports in Canada, France, Poland, and Amsterdam. And in all of those, everybody gets the same screening process. And then, if you trigger something, you get more. Actually, in Canada, I've gotten secondary screening where they've taken swabs of my hand and my luggage to check for explosive residue. But that's about it.
Yeah, you must look like a tourist.
Well, no, it's random.
Yeah, that's what they tell you, unless you look like a terrorist. Well, any other thoughts on this one?
But basically, it seems that the TSA has some program for trying to get people through the airports faster. By doing a more cursory scan, and at that, it seems that's what this is specifically about. All
right, so this next story that you have,
I got my first full body scan in Amsterdam.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How was that?
Basically, it looks almost exactly like the man trap at the data center, except for you have to hold your arms up above your head, and it takes like 2.5 seconds, and then you walk out.
Now, which airport was that?
That was Amsterdam, Schiphol or whatever it's called.
I didn't know. I didn't realize those were being used over there. Interesting. Did you get to keep the pictures?
I didn't get to see the picture.
Oh, that's too bad. You could post them on your Facebook
basically,
page.
when you come out, there's a computer screen, and it just says OK on a green screen, or I don't know, something else on a red screen.
Right. Yeah. They got high resolution.
Poland, though, I got the most thorough pat down I've ever gotten anywhere.
Oh, really?
Yes.
You ought to contact them and say, can I get the high resolution TIFF of my image? I'm just curious. I'd like to see that. No, I'm kidding. All right. So we talk about this next story that, me, Alan, I'm a file server guy, and these types of headlines They make me a little worried. They make me a little cautious for a while. So what's going on here?
The heebie-jeebies is what they do.
Exactly. And I go, wait a minute. And I see this kind of stuff. I'm like, why is there even anything changing with the file system? It should be set in stone now, unless it's getting better, I guess.
They found a serious bug in the Linux kernel that could result in ext4 file systems suffering serious data corruption. Basically, a bug was accidentally introduced in Linux kernel version 3.6.2, but then the change that has the bug in it was backported into 3.4 and 3.5.
Oh.
So the bug has to do with the way that the superblock and the journal get updated. And if you unmount and remount file system very quickly, like basically don't keep it mounted for long enough for the journal to roll over, then you could end up corrupting the file system.
Well, that could happen like in a troubleshooting scenario or something where
Yes, or an upgrade scenario where you like install a new kernel, reboot, install a new user land. Although I don't know if you do it that way in Linux, but that's how you do it in FreeBSD. And because of that, yeah, so not that many people have run into it, but it's definitely something to watch out for.
Yeah, that's too bad.
They made a patch for the problem, but then someone from Red Hat read over the patch and figured out that that didn't solve all of the problems. And so then there was a second patch the next day, and it's hard to say how long it'll be before you start to see that change in the mainline kernels.
And of course,
some kernels like 3.4 are reaching their end of life and may not get an official patch.
Well, and I hope they get it fixed too, because of course, I believe the next enterprise version of Red Hat will be based on Fedora 18, if I'm correct, and that is going to be using at least kernel 3.5, at least. So they've got to get this ironed out before it goes into an enterprise distro. Exactly. You know, and that's right. The purpose of the enterprise distro is to sort of isolate from these more cutting edge issues, but you know, they still happen.
But yet when they backport the stuff down to lower versions and with obviously not enough testing or analysis first, then you can run into these problems.
Update, related story, the lead development team of ZFS seen at Hallmark looking for sorry about your file system cards. I wonder where that you know how I'm bitter about the ZFS, Alan.
Yep. There were a couple of talks about ZFS at your BSDCon.
Well, I would think so, right? And every time I mention ZFS, almost always somebody links in the chat room to an Ask Ubuntu thread or a wiki thread telling me how I can get ZFS on Linux, but they're just not getting it, Al. They're not getting it. All right, well, should we talk a little bit about DreamHost?
Sure.
All right, what's going on?
So DreamHost went around and changed the SSH keys on all of their servers without notifying their customers ahead of time.
Oh, well, that would be a little scary if you're all of a sudden start getting these error messages.
Yes, and so then they did a blog post about it, and so when people complained to support, they're like, go read this blog post. Okay. Which is the opposite of how it should have been handled most likely. So DreamHost, which is a large shared web hosting provider, generated new SSH keys for basically all of their servers on Wednesday. In the post, they claimed it's the result of security maintenance, which we are performing to prevent exploitation of weak or outdated keys. Well, SSH keys don't get outdated unless they're too low.
Or they were leaked?
Not enough bits. Yes. Like I'm saying here in the show, it seems like an excessive step to go and change all of these keys unless one or more of those SSH host private keys was compromised, in which case that's a huge security problem.
Yeah.
And that would explain them very rapidly changing all their keys rather than sending out an email saying, you know, at the beginning of next month, we're going to change all the keys. Here's what the new keys are going to be so that you can verify them and so on and so on. Because that's how it should have been done if they were going to have to do this for some other reason. But the fact that they did this basically overnight definitely...
It was a rush job.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it was an emergency type of situation.
And then when Murr got in on the next day, he quickly posted up this blog post because they were getting a ton of calls and people were pissed off. I mean, they should have given people a heads up. This blog post should have gone up before the change was made. They should have given people a few days, maybe put a notice in their control panel, and then made the switch.
So if the keys were compromised, that means that basically someone who has the keys could make a server using those keys and then, do DNS spoofing or something. And so when you connect to this server that's not actually DreamHost, it presents the DreamHost key, and then you attempt to log into it, right? You don't get an error. It tries to connect. And so when you send your username and password, they could log that and be like, oh, look, I now have your username and password.
That gets me angry, Alan.
Yep.
You won't like me when I'm angry.
So DreamHost made a number of mistakes in this case. The first one is not giving the users a heads up before making a change.
Right.
Because it's very bad to condition users to see that scary warning and then just ignore it.
Right.
That scary warning is scary for a reason.
Yeah.
And the blog post encourages users to just delete the old SSH key from their cache and accept the new key. Although they don't publish a list of the new keys, so users have no way to double check that the key they're being presented from is actually DreamHost, not a man-in-the-middle attack, which is the whole point of those keys in the first place.
Right.
For most of my servers, we also publish the SSH fingerprint as a DNS record. Now, most SSH clients don't support that by default, but at least there's some authoritative list of what our SSH keys actually are.
That's an interesting idea, Alan.
So the purpose of an SSH fingerprint is to verify the identity of the remote computer. It works very much the same way as SSL, except unlike SSL, there's no central authority who signs a certificate, right? You just generate your own. It's basically every certificate is self-signed. But the idea is that the first time you connect, you double check and make sure it's actually the right server, and then you cache that fingerprint, and next time you connect, you make sure the fingerprint is the same. If the main goal of the system is really to identify you when that key changes unexpectedly, like in this case. Because if you're not expecting it and all of a sudden it's a different key, that suggests you're not in fact connecting to the server you want to connect to, but to some other server which may be trying to steal your credentials or perform a man-in-the-middle attack on you.
Yeah. Or in my case, you're somehow got your IPs mixed up on your servers.
Yeah, or you change the DNS to point from one server to another server or whatever. Yeah. So an attacker that is able to perform a man-in-the-middle attack during this time frame when users are willing to just ignore the security warning and accept it because, oh yeah, DreamHost is just changing their keys or whatever, that would mean that they could actually pull off the man-in-the-middle attack. Because another thing is, like, OpenSSH, the default SSH client, doesn't, unlike PuTTY, it doesn't just give you the option to accept the new key and overwrite the old key. It prints a giant evil warning and then exits.
Yeah.
And if you want to accept a new key, you have to manually go into your known host file, either with a text editor or using the SSH-keygen command, and remove the old key. And then accept a new one. Right? They put that extra step in there because 99.9% of the time you probably don't want to accept this new key. Right? If you weren't expecting the key to be different, it's probably a bad thing.
See if I have. I probably have. Yeah. So here's my. Of course, this just looks like a wall of text. But here's my known host file, and you can see each host has a line entry in here. And if one of them had changed, I'd have to go in here and then just pull that line out right there, and then that would stop getting the error message.
Yeah, I have a couple that are quite big, like the one in my Nagios monitoring system.
I bet
is quite big.
Yeah, this one's not that big compared to that.
Looking at in the help post from DreamHost, their known host file has over 10,000 lines in it.
Oh, geez, I bet. Wow. Well,
I don't know what all the keys are for.
Yeah, I think what really the elephant in the room here is that DreamHost. We kind of suspect DreamHost was hiding something from their customers, likely.
Yes, it very much seems like there had to be a very pressing need for them to change their keys out so quickly.
Yeah.
And if there was, we probably should be hearing about it instead of just dealing with the mess that they caused by changing the keys. And if they just changed the keys for no reason, then they did it wrong, right? This should have happened after plenty of notice to the customers and all kinds of other stuff.
Agreed, sir. Agreed. Well, very interesting. Now, if you're a DreamHost customer and you want to find out more about that, we have links to that in the show notes. Alan, what do you say we take a break right here and let's talk about somebody who does these kinds of things right. And of course, that is the world's #1 domain name registrar, GoDaddy.com. Now look, if you want to make an impact online, GoDaddy.com has got you covered. And we have fantastic deals to get yourself a .com domain name for $5.99. Use our code 599TECH when you check out. You get your .com, $5.99, up to 3 of those bad boys, and then it's like $7. I mean, it's crazy. The savings blows my mind. Stop it. Whatever you're doing right now, go get yourself a .com. You won't believe the savings. But maybe you don't need a .com. Maybe you got some domains you want to renew. You know, the end of the world's coming, December 21st, 2012, and if you don't get your renewals in before then, you are screwed because aliens are going to squat on that stuff so bad. And also, I might mention that this code also expires at the end of October, so that's maybe a more even pressing deadline. The end of the world's important too, though. Just use our code GO20OFF5 to save 20% off anything you're buying. GO20OFF5 saves you 20% from the fine folks over at the GoDaddy.com. Long-time sponsors. And, you know, here's a great real-world use case of how GoDaddy just makes life really easy. Somebody in the chat room the other day, Alan, asked me, said, Chris, how do you make jblive.fm and jblive.am automatically just redirect to the different streams? And, like, he's noticed that I can type that URL into VLC or Totem Player or on my mobile phone, and they all redirect. And it's like, what kind of crazy complex setup did you do to set that up? It's like, well, I just went over to GoDaddy, went to the admin panel. They're in the DNS thing that's forward, and then you put in the URL, and it actually does a little auto checking to figure out the best if it should be like an HTTP redirect or what it should be, and then they just do it for you. It's just taken care of.
Right. That's what a lot of people don't understand, how much extra GoDaddy is doing for you there. When you do an HTTP redirect like that, it's not something that goes in DNS. They basically set that subdomain or whatever to point to their IP address, and then their web server actually answers an HTTP request and does a redirect.
Yeah.
So they're not just providing DNS there; they're actually providing microscopic HTTP hosting for you for free.
And it's just all done behind the scenes, and it's really done intelligently. And I've been using it for months and months and months, and I absolutely love it. So thank you to GoDaddy for sponsoring this week's episode of TechSNAP. Again, use our code 599TECH to get your .com for $5.99, or our fantastic code GO20OFF5 to get 20% off anything you buy at GoDaddy.com. All right, Alan, now I believe we have another news story. Boy, a lot's happened in the week that we took off, and since then, it's been nuts. All right, what is it, Alan?
Okay, so a mathematician found that Google and a number of other web services are actually using very weak keys for DKIM, which is the domain keys system for validating emails.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're explaining the story.
Yes, so a mathematician named Zachary Harris got an email from a Google headhunter for a job as a site reliability engineer. He thought this was odd because he wasn't expecting such a thing, and he's a mathematician. He doesn't know anything about being a sysadmin.
Well,
so seeing as he's not an expert in the field, he assumed it was some kind of spam or a phishing scam. So he starts looking at the headers, and he found that the email was actually signed properly with the Google DKIM key. So it actually came from Google. And he was like, well, that's weird.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, while looking at it, he noticed that the key that they were signing it with is only 512 bits. Well, the DKIM standard calls for at least a key of at least 1024 bits.
Oh.
Otherwise, someone could factor the key. Right, so what DKIM does is a process where when email is going out through your mail server, you cryptographically sign it in the headers with your private key. So you have one private key per domain, and you'll sign the emails as they leave your server. And then you publish the public key for that in DNS. So then when someone gets an email from you, they can see the signature there, verify it in DNS, and know for 100% for sure that that email came from your domain and wasn't spoofed by some spammer or a phishing scam. Mm-hmm. The problem is that if you use a weak key, someone could figure out the private key and spoof it, even though they're not supposed to be able to. So then the mathematician Harris, who's not a security researcher at all, and according to the post, didn't even know what DKIM was until he started investigating the headers to figure out if it was a fake email or not. He explored a bunch of other sites and found that weak keys were being used by Amazon, Apple, Dell, eBay, HP, HSBC, LinkedIn, Match.com, PayPal, SBC Global, Twitter, US Bank, and Yahoo.
Oh, jeez.
Most likely the reason why they're using a shorter key there is it takes less CPU power to encrypt each email that way, or to sign each email.
Yeah, they get a lot of those domains do a lot of email.
Yeah. So they found, some places using only 384-bit keys, a lot of 512s, and that the banks and PayPal were using 768, which is better, but especially if you're like PayPal and you're getting a lot of spoofed email, really need to have a strong key. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the DKIM standard calls for a minimum of a 1024-bit key. As of this year or last year, SSL certificates require a 2048-bit key. And, the emails, if you're trying to protect against phishing and spear phishing and attacks like this, it's probably important that we have the same level of security on the emails.
Yeah.
So the mathematician found that a 384-bit key he could factor on his laptop in about 24 hours. And a 512-bit key could be factored in about 3 days using Amazon EC2 instances.
Clever.
At a cost of about $75.
No.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about that is just you set it and forget it. Walk away and just choose on it.
Well, you don't want to forget it, because if you don't turn off the EC2s after they're done, you're going to keep paying for them.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. Don't forget it.
But so it's just for some perspective. In 1998, it was a huge academic breakthrough to ever crack a 512-bit key. When the first time that happened in 1998. Mm-hmm. And today you can do it in 72 hours on AWS.
That is pretty amazing.
Yeah. And that's why SSL requires at least a 2048-bit key. I don't know how many instances, but I'm sure you could figure it out by looking at, $75 divided by 72 hours means he was spending this many dollars an hour, and the servers cost, these rates, and there you go.
Wow. So this.
Oh, and the thing I forgot, it's not in the show notes, but it happened. He's to prove his point, he sent emails to Sergey and
Larry
from each other, but with the reply to header set to come to him. Never got emails back.
No, they figured it out.
Them,
yeah.
But he noticed about 2 days later that all of a sudden Google was using 2048-bit keys for their DKIM.
I mean, this whole process.
That sparked someone to notice what was going on.
Well, I think that's what's so funny about it. I mean, it's just this whole innocent, what are these guys? This isn't really Google's trying to hire me. Who's doing this? And it just starts this whole snowball process.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then he sends the fake email, and then Larry or Sergey was like, Larry didn't send this to me, so how come it says it's verified from Larry? And so he... apparently it got the attention of the right people at Google, and they fixed it amazingly quickly, actually, considering that they would have had to go and change all their DKIM keys.
Oh, yeah, they stepped on the gas.
The difference between DKIM like this and SSH is that the public key is published in DNS, so you can look it up authoritatively. So when you change your key, it's not that hard to do. In fact, I think DKIM even has a process for having multiple keys, so you can have your old key and your new key. So old email signed with the old key will still work for a while, because obviously, when you change the key for at least about a day, there's going to be some emails going through the network that are still signed with the old one, right? Mm-hmm. Or if some people are doing the check on their client rather than in the mail server, then if they check the email after the fact, after the change, it would say it wasn't valid when it actually was valid at the time. So this system was architected a little better and actually has a system for having the right keys published authoritatively in DNS. But yes, most DNS servers now have a new record type called SSH-FP for SSH fingerprints. It's just that on Windows, the DNS resolver library doesn't have a way to specify that record type. So clients like PuTTY can't actually use the DNS FP, although you can configure your OpenSSH to do that if you want.
There you go. Geez, Alan. Well, I read that headline. I thought, oh, this sounds interesting. I saw it like this morning. And now I got it right here on TechSNAP. I love that. Sometimes, Alan, you see these great stories, but it's always helpful to have you kind of break down what actually happened.
Yep.
All right. Well, any thoughts on that one?
Not really.
Okay, sir. Well, then you know what that means. It means it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your feedback to TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com or using that contact link at the top at jupiterbroadcasting.com. Or, you know what? Submit in a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. First time I've mentioned that this week. All right, Alan, we got a batch of questions to get through. Are you ready for the first one?
Yep.
All righty. It comes in from Stefan, and Stefan wants to say, hello, Alan and Chris. Well, thank you for wanting to say that, Stefan. I've only fairly recently, a couple of months ago, discovered your shows, but I'm thoroughly enjoying them and learning from them. He goes on to say, it's really great getting the news and information from actual system administrators instead of just enthusiasts, hobbyists. Oh, well, thanks. Although we're a little bit of both. But, yeah. Yep. The real-world examples you guys give are great in getting information across and in giving inspiring new ideas. Now that the gushing is done, on to the question. Being somewhat of a beginner on the Unix side, I've mostly administered Windows domains. There's one question I've never really had answered to my satisfaction. How do you keep your Linux and BSD servers safely up to date? Especially the actual production servers, which of course you must never ever break. I never install X on any of my servers. That always seemed to be in best regards to resources, which, now that I think about it, I'd also like your opinion on. On Windows, this is relatively a simple affair, with or without WSUS. But on Unix, I don't really know. It's a company I worked for. In a company I worked for a long time ago, the Linux gateways were administered by an outside IT company, and they would send us a PDF report with the updates for the month, so unless they type those in by hand, there might have been a nice reporting tool that does that. I apologize for turning the question into a multiple-part question, and it jumps all over. Thanks in advance for taking time to read this, and keep up the good work. He also says, say hi to Brian, he's a fan of LAS. And he says, he's from the Netherlands.
There's a couple different things. FreeBSD's core updates, to get pushed out, there's a RSS feed and an email list and so on. And they're fairly easy to update with the tools like FreeBSD Update. But really, if you're doing a production system that's really critical, you pretty much have to have two machines, right? And basically, you have them set up from some kind of high availability, and you do the updates on one of the two machines and make sure everything works. And then switch the load over to it, probably wait a week or more, and then upgrade the second machine. Mm-hmm. Right? The whole idea there is to make sure that if there's a problem with the update, you still have a machine that can do the job. It's important to have backups and to be able to revert if something in an update goes wrong as well.
Yeah. Backups of config files too, because update configuration files.
Yes,
what about leveraging something like virtualization for testing? Did you think that's
good enough? You can also do like a P2V to take your physical host and virtualize it.
Sure, yeah.
And then try the update and make sure it works. And then if it does, then you can try it on the actual host. But yeah, it's important to do testing of updates before you try to roll them out live. So even if you're on Windows and you're doing WSUS or whatever, Microsoft does some testing on the patches for you, and they're usually pretty good, but you still want to test it yourself before you deploy it live.
And because he brought up WSUS, I kind of got the impression he was also talking about like a centralized patch management system. Like, do you have anything that you can manage the updates across a large range of FreeBSD machines at once, or do you SSH
the FreeBSD update tool can be set up with the cron job to update or to download all the updates and so on. But remember, because FreeBSD is architected a bit different, there's the base OS, which will get updated with the FreeBSD update tool, and then everything else is third-party packages, which are not part of the operating system.
So Apache or Nginx.
And all that. Those are not covered by the regular update system. There's a separate system. So for the main part, you'll get emails and so on, and it's all sorted. There's an email list for the ports as well. But basically, there's a service called VUXML, which basically provides a list of packages that are vulnerable. And you can there's tools you can get in the port tree, like Port Audit, that will check, say nightly, check all of your installed packages and email you a list of any ones that need updating because of a vulnerability. And then you can take care of updating them.
Now, will Puppet allow you to do any kind of like automated deployment?
Somewhat, yes. I haven't played with having it automatically update packages yet because I generally prefer to not automate that because of the potential of it breaking something.
Yep.
So I usually do it more in batches.
One thing that I like, some distributions like Ubuntu and but especially Red Hat, right? Red Hat has the Red Hat Enterprise Network, and you can group servers into production groups. So you could say, these are, like, say you have 3 front-end web servers, right? Yep. Well, if you know the timing's right, you could have 2 of those production web servers in one group and another in a different group. And you could first deploy the patches to that group for the testing group. And if it goes offline, well, you still got 2 other servers you can fall back on. And then if it goes okay, then you know it's safe to deploy that patch to the other group. And so they kind of will break things out like that a little bit. And that's nice because it is one, click from one central administration panel. But the downside, like Alan's saying, is you don't get that hands-on immediate feedback. You kind of have to go and check things out afterwards. So it's kind of a give and take.
But yeah, basically you always want to test updates before you deploy them live. You don't just throw them at live production stuff.
Absolutely. All right. So good luck with that, Stefan, and curious to see what you come up with. And, if you're doing it in production, you might consider one of those distros that has an enterprise support contract, because that's kind of what they're there for.
And at least doing, having a spare machine or virtualization or whatever to just test the update before you do it.
Yeah. All right.
Make sure you do a backup before you start upgrading. So if it goes wrong, you can restore. And yes, the nice thing about, especially with configuration files, is the way I have my Puppet set up is all my configuration files are in a Subversion repository. Yep. So I have complete change logs.
And that's stuff. Really nice. So
it's very easy to roll back to an earlier version of a config if something goes wrong.
And if you work with multiple administrators, depending on how your config management system works, you can find out who broke it. You can get their name.
And it also just merges changes that 2 different people make.
Yeah.
And deals with conflicts but yes, it's important to have
accountability.
Basically, it takes care of documenting why a change was made, right? If as part of the SVN commit of the change, they explain why they had to change that.
Right.
It's when you go to change the same value later, you can find out why is it set this way in the first place.
All right, Alan, our next question comes from David, and it sounds like this might be a solution that Nginx could provide, but we'll see here. He says, we have an externally hosted web store that needs to communicate with servers in our corporate network for web services calls. In order to do this, our network team needs to NAT, quote-unquote, the machines on our corporate network. I'm not sure if that's even the right term, but that's what they use. It appears that they just give corporate web servers a second IP address in a different range that matches with the externally hosted web store. For each QA system, we need to request an address change on our side and update to the routing table on the hosted side. The network person keeps complaining that they are running out of addresses. I was thinking of consolidating all of these QA web server addresses into one Nginx reverse proxy. Then, based on the URL, route the traffic to the appropriate QA server. For example, you go to 172.1.15/QA, it might route you to the internal QA system under host 10.15.1.5, while going to 172.17.1.15/QA2 would send you to a completely different system.
Yes. So this is a question we get a lot of times, usually phrased a little bit differently, like even people that have something just at home.
Yeah.
They only have one public-facing IP address, and all their websites kind of need to be on port 80. So they port forward port 80 to one machine, an Nginx machine, and then in that configuration, you can use location blocks to say, for this directory, reverse proxy the connections to this web server, and for this other directory to this other server.
Right.
And that way you can basically have multiple different web servers on a single IP by basically using the reverse proxy. They don't even have to actually be based on a directory. You can use the host header. So you can basically say, if it's for this domain name, proxy it to this server. If it's for this domain name, proxy it to this other server.
I like that.
And then, because virtual hosting, which uses the host header in HTTP, allows you to host multiple websites on a single IP address, because you can differentiate which site is being requested from the host header. And so, yeah, Nginx is a great solution for that. If it's just something for home or if it's something for a corporate environment. Either way, it works very well.
There you go. All right. Good luck, David.
And it also means you can support SSL even if the app in the back end doesn't.
Good note. All right. Pitor? I'm not quite sure. P-I-T-O-R. Maybe that's just a nick. Pitor? P-I-O-T-R. P-I-O. Pointer? I don't know. Anyways, Alan, kind of wanted to get your take on this, being people might be getting the impression you're a BSD fan. He said, I'm a recent listener. I can't believe I didn't know about you guys before. I love the full-on technical, non-BS information you guys give. It does really help me with my everyday IT thought process. Question for you, Alan. Have you tried to install FreeBSD on the Raspberry Pi? And he provides some links. He says
I haven't been able to get a Raspberry Pi.
He says he's gonna end up subscribing to the donation to help support the show. And by the way, he says, P.S. Your website is great, but could you put a brief description of each show on the show's page? I don't really know what they are about or who is in them. I'm bad with names. See, I'm getting a lot of requests for changes to the Jupiter Broadcasting website recently. I guess people feel like it's time for change. And there's another one. Now, we do have, if you go to jupiterbroadcasting.com and you see on the front page, you'll have, I should just bring this up because this comes up. I probably get an email about this a week. I don't know what it is. It means new people, and that's great.
Yep.
So you go to jupiterbroadcasting.com. Now you say you'll be looking for TechSNAP 80 or 81 actually, but we'll go with 80 for this since that's what's posted. You click on that. Now you see here's the video. If you scroll down just a little bit, we'll have a description of what that episode's about. And then the other thing
I don't think that's what he's asking, actually. He's asking about a description of each show. Like he doesn't know what Coda Radio is about.
Yeah.
Or what the faux show is.
Yeah, we do have to get that too. We have to get that too.
Well, because you have when you go to each show's page, you just have the tiles of the episodes. I guess you could try to put a little header in there for each show, just explaining what it is.
The current theme doesn't allow for it. We'd have to just hack it together or something, right? But or a wiki. We do have that. There is the
there's the JB
page.
Wiki.
Yeah. Maybe that might actually be better to link to, right?
Yep.
I wonder if people would grok that. So, anyways, so what I was explaining is where you can find the show notes. So, anyways, cool. I'd be curious to see what people could do.
So apparently the Raspberry Pi is supported mostly.
That's cool.
In FreeBSD in current, which is the unstable developmental version. So basically, what will eventually be FreeBSD 10.
Does it have support for the Pi built in?
Yeah. Cool. Well, because it has plenty of support for different ARM devices. It was just a matter of getting the Raspberry Pi. The very interesting thing was, originally there wasn't going to be that much interest in doing the Raspberry Pi with FreeBSD on it because the video card, the video processor built into the Raspberry Pi remember, it was a closed source binary blob video driver.
Yes.
But yesterday they announced that they're going to open source it.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I finally. I am a little shocked.
You say finally, but I wasn't under the impression it was ever going to happen.
People have been asking for quite a while.
Yes, but basically Broadcom is becoming the first system-on-a-chip developer to open source their video stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that could mean that if some BSD developer wants to, that a driver could be built for FreeBSD, meaning full FreeBSD.
Yeah, sure.
Although I'd be much more interested in the device if it had real Ethernet ports instead of the USB ones.
I think that's what I'm waiting for too.
But actually, one of the talks I saw at EuroBSDCon was about the Ethernet boards, which are lower power and lower RAM, but they're all about having real Ethernet ports.
There's a couple other devices out there right now that have Ethernet too, but the oh yeah, here it is. Look at this. This is neat. Oh, it's even smaller, isn't it?
Yep.
Oh gosh, this is getting so cool. Oh my gosh, they have add-ons. They have
porting
cool add-ons.
FreeBSD to the Ethernet board.
Wow, Alan, it's crazy times for these small kind of devices, isn't it? It really is crazy how fast this stuff's going.
Because we talked a little bit last week or a couple weeks ago about NAND FS, which is currently being developed on FreeBSD with the Marvel plug computer.
Right.
So it's a computer that's literally like the size of the adapter brick you'd normally have for some device.
Yeah.
And you just plug it into the wall, and it's a whole computer.
All right, Alan. So there was a topic that came up last, I can't remember if it was 80 or 79, where somebody wanted to know if maybe they could bridge two different ISP connections to get a little better performance, and you'd raised a few concerns about what what the fallout of that might be. So Luca, I think he's from Italy, and he writes in, "Hi, Alan and Chris. Thanks for the great show. I'm enjoying it. On episode 80, Alan answered Ivan's question, which was also about bridging two connections from two different ISPs, and that it could create issues due to different IP addresses on each one. So I was wondering, wouldn't it be possible to route every connection through a VPS or an actual server to get them to sum up the bandwidth of the two? Or some connections combined? There are connections combined. Well, in theory, there shouldn't be any address-related issues since everything goes through the server's public IP, and it shouldn't be able to handle the bandwidth from my home connection just fine."
Well, first of all, you're going to end up using double the bandwidth on the VPS because it's going to have to download every byte from the internet and then upload it to you and vice versa. So it'll use up a lot of bandwidth on the VPS. The problem still there is how do you balance the traffic
at the VPS.
To the VPS across the two connections?
Yeah.
Although, if you're doing it as a VPN and it creates a tap device, you might be able to create a lag between the two tap devices.
Create a lag doesn't seem like a good idea.
I mean, a link aggregation group, not a lag. Okay. Although that kind of assumes that the two connections are equally sized. If one's a lot bigger than the other, then that might not work out as well. But it might be possible, but you're spending a lot more money that way.
Yeah.
If you have if it's your only option, maybe, but I just bought a bigger single connection.
It's not really, there's not a great.
Well, but back in the day it was hard to get a faster connection.
I still think there's more direct bang for your buck. If you want to do something, if you want to take advantage of two connections, just say some activities happen on this connection and some activities happen on this connection, and like I torrent on this one and I browse on this one or something like that.
That's basically how I did it in college. There was cable internet was included in our room, but it was shared with all my roommates, and they would often, max it out. So I just bought a DSL connection for myself. I used that for playing the games and did all the downloading on the cable.
Yes, sir. There you go. Exactly. All right, Alan. Now, how about we get to a question that involves pfSense, because it's been a while. So it's been a little while, and I'm jonesing for a good pfSense question.
Hold on. You're like reading questions that I'm not seeing in the show notes.
Oh, yeah?
Like you skipped one about jail networking?
I think that's the one I'm about to get to, isn't it?
Oh, okay. Well, then you're doing it in order than they are in the show notes.
Maybe. I don't know, because sometimes my tabs open up in the wrong order, and then everything gets all wonky. It's all right, though. All right, I'll open up that one. All right, so, Alan, question from Michael, or as he prefers to pronounce, Michael. Hello, Chris and Alan. I am a great fan of the show, and I admire Alan's commitment to FreeBSD. Because of the show, I want to learn more about FreeBSD and its jails. I understand that each jail has its own network device and its own IP address. But suppose your suppose your FreeBSD host is been assigned only one IP address. How do you get each jail to have its own IP address? Do you NAT that or something similar? Miguel.
A jail doesn't actually get its own separate device. What it does is it takes over one IP address from the host. So basically, you'd have your regular network card, say it's on the LAN and it has an internal address or whatever, and you just add a second IP address to your network card, and then you allocate that one to the jail. And then the jail takes it over kind of thing.
Yeah.
So if you only have one external IP, the traditional way for jails is to bind extra internal addresses to your loopback adapter. So use 127.0.0.2 and .3 and .4 and so on, and then use NAT.
I like the suggestion this should be called the Jail Action Show. We've talked a lot about jails, I guess. I guess they're trying to imply that we mentioned they're cool.
I haven't played with it much, but there's a kernel feature called vimage and vnet that allows more advanced networking and routing and stuff in jails.
Yeah.
But I haven't actually used it, so I don't know that much about it. But yeah, for our servers, some of our jails will have a publicly facing IP address, like the one for the Minecraft server has one, because we run the Minecraft server in a jail so that I could give root on the Minecraft server to the guys that run the Minecraft server without giving them root on my server.
Right.
So that just has so the real network card that faces the internet on the machine has 4 or 5 IP addresses. One of those is allocated to the jail. For a lot of our internal services in our rack in Toronto here, we have like 192.168 type IPs, like internal APIPA type IPs, that are just on the real LAN that way. And then you can also just do it on localhost if you want an unroutable address, because sometimes you want a jail that you don't want to be accessing the internet at all.
All righty. Good question. And another little bit of information about FreeBSD jails. All right. Now, I did mention we're live, and there is a chat room. If you guys want to join us, jblive.tv, Thursdays, 1 p.m. Pacific, which is 4 o'clock Eastern. Or you can also tune in at jblive.info for the audio stream. All right, Alan, you ready for the next question?
Yep.
All right, this one comes in from Sean. He says, hello, Chris. Hello, Alan. A number of weeks ago, I wrote in asking about conserving bandwidth under a very limiting cap of 100 gigabytes a month. Well, I'd just like to let you know that everything is installed and running on a home server. pfSense allowed me to save about 20% of my bandwidth and really saved me a lot of money. Although I did end up moving to a new ISP without any limits. Oh, that's good. I now have double the speed for 20 less a month. So I suggest people look into their own bills and find out if they're being ripped off by your ISP or not. I really do appreciate your help, and learning all about pfSense has been a fun experience, and I feel like it is something that should be used in my office. Yeah, pfSense is great for offices.
Yes, there was a talk about pfSense at EuroBSDCon, and then there was also one about FreeNAS. I learned a lot about the internals of FreeNAS and how it actually works and how it stores stuff in the database and so on.
Oh, really? Interesting. He just goes on to say, thanks for doing everything you do every single week. And he says he makes some Amazon purchases and he'll be using our affiliate. Thank you. Alan, pfSense, just want to say, worked out great for him. And he said there he saved about 20% of his bandwidth. I would imagine that'd probably be through like squid caching and DNS and stuff like that. Yeah. Yep. All right. Now, did I miss anything, or is that all of them?
That's all of them except for my little story.
Right, yeah. Go ahead. And so you had a little bit of feedback in person, didn't you?
Yes. So while I was at EuroBSDCon, a couple people recognized me from the Linux Action Show episodes or TechSNAP or whatever.
Yeah.
Although a couple of people didn't recognize me until they heard my voice, because a lot of people are audio only, right?
Yep.
But while I was having lunch at EuroBSDCon at one point, this guy, flagged me or whatever, and we were talking. And it turns out he's a FreeBSD developer who's responsible for a lot of the USB development that goes on.
Oh, okay.
And he proceeded to correct me, or
sternly.
Yes. Basically, he's expended a great deal of effort to improve support for webcams and a bunch of other consumer-type USB devices under FreeBSD 9.1 and therefore PCBSD.
Uh-huh.
And so while talking about that on the PCBSD 9.1 review the other week, we had mentioned that, sometimes the support wasn't that great, although now it is much better.
He took umbrage with that, I guess, huh?
Yes.
He didn't.
And as if to emphasize this point, just after we were done talking, while we were finishing our lunches, somebody else walks up to him and hands him a USB device that is not currently supported. And they're like, here, have this, make it work.
Please make this work. Please, sir. Yeah. Please.
And it kind of shows that for a lot of this type of development, if you have a device that you want to work and it doesn't work, sometimes the best way is to donate one of the devices to a developer who will make it work.
You forget, right? You forget that it's a guy. And at these events that like you've just gone to, you could sit down and have lunch with the guy that makes USB webcams work on FreeBSD.
Yeah.
And that
I had drinks with the guy that used to be the project manager for Varnish and implemented OpenPAM in FreeBSD. Or
really,
yeah. And I met all kinds of really cool people.
That's really neat. Yeah, it's always a thrill. Those kind of in real, you realize that you can contact a lot of people you never will be able to contact on the internet, and that's amazing. But then you meet these people, and it just makes it so much more real. So Alan has some links to some of his pictures from EuroBSDCon in the show notes.
Mostly not my pictures. Thanks to Olivier Roberts, who shared his pictures.
And they're good pictures, too. They're really well done.
He has a nice camera.
Yeah,
I have my cell phone.
Yeah.
And
it's not quite the same.
I suck at taking pictures, so I didn't take a picture of anything interesting. I have a picture of a couple of buildings and a picture of a very large keg of beer.
Yeah. Usually that's what I take, and maybe like a bathroom stall. I'll take a picture just for fun, just to send a picture.
I didn't take a picture of the rather interesting bathroom stall I ran into in Poland. It had like an automatically cleaning seat
Oh, and you didn't take a picture?
No.
I would have tweeted
the seat
that.
had like a plastic cover on it. And then when you pressed the button, it rotated it and give you fresh plastic.
No, that is so cool. No water bidet or anything like that, though. No little spray.
It cost $1 to use the toilet. Well, it cost 1 zloty, which would be like 25 cents or 30 cents or something.
Okay, that's not outrageous.
Yeah.
But what if you really got to go and you don't have any money?
Find a different bathroom.
Wow. Okay, well, there you go.
The one at the train station was 2 zloty.
Maybe that's how they pay for the robotic
like an
seats.
attendant, right? So it's fairly well cleaned.
Wow. Well, okay, there you go. I'd hate to be that guy. So if you want to send in your feedback to the show, you can do so. TechSNAP at JupiterBroadcasting.com or use that contact link. And I'm sorry, I actually discovered that there was a pretty good chunk of emails that I missed. I have a lot of filtering in my email because I get a lot of email, and so some of it just got filtered into like these bulk folders that I've broken out, and that's supposed to help me find this stuff, and I just didn't. So I missed some of your emails over the last couple of weeks, so I apologize about that. But you can send them to now. I'm watching now. TechSNAP at JupiterBroadcasting.com. All right, Alan. With the feedback all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that didn't quite make it to the top of the show. We still want to talk about them, maybe give you some links to follow up on after the show, and they're almost always exclusively powered by our subreddit, except for when they're not, over at links.techsnap.tv. All right, Alan, are you ready for the first Roundup story?
Yep.
All right, now this one will have the Mac users scratching their heads a little bit, but you almost kind of see the logic to Apple's insanity here. Apple removes Java from all OS X web browsers via an OS update. Users who install this update will find the browser placeholder when they encounter any web-based content that uses Java. So instead of a Java applet, you get this little holder that says, this version or vendor needs to be of JRE needs to be downloaded. It gives you a link, and it goes and pulls it from Oracle's website now. This is a sort of a response to the rash of issues that Oracle's had, and this update went out this Wednesday, so yesterday, I guess, or last Wednesday.
We'll have more about Java as well. We talked about some of the patches or some of the vulnerabilities found before. One of them isn't going to be fixed in the October update, or I guess the October update might be already out.
Okay.
And the guy who discovered it said that he managed to write a patch for it in 30 minutes, so he doesn't see why Oracle took so long and then didn't publish a patch.
That's crazy.
And so he's like, here, Oracle, you can have my patch if you will please do an emergency update again instead of waiting till February for the next bulk update.
Yeah.
But we'll have more on that story next week.
All right, cool. All right, well, this one kind of caught your attention because we love a little data center porn. Facebook adapts their open compute for like shared space in data centers, like just a rack, I guess.
So basically, Facebook's open compute standard uses non-standard racks. Their racks are wider.
Yeah.
And that means that you couldn't use their hardware spec in a regular leased space data center. So now they've adapted it slightly, so it uses a regular like 208 volt line rather than the strange 277 volts that Facebook normally uses. And it fits in more regular shaped racks, although the racks are heavier and taller than regular racks, so it's still a bit of an issue. It's not like you can just buy a couple of these servers and slide them into an existing rack. But if you have a cage somewhere, you'd be able to get these to work in leased space in a regular data center.
Yeah,
Partly because in some places, like in Los Angeles and some of the major internet hubs, Facebook leases space, and they're really not going to be able to build out their own data center to do a custom job at it.
Exactly. And I just assumed when we talked about their open compute initiative before that they were using standard servers in these shared locales, because you got to figure if you
they were until now.
Yeah, and if you want to grow quick, if you got to scale for a big event, say, you have the F8 conference or whatever they call it, and you want to add capacity really quick, you're going to have to use third-party data centers. There's just no, we can't just go buy physical data center space every time you want to add a few more servers.
Right. So basically, the open compute was only used at their new data center in Oregon, and now they're adapting it so that it'll be useful at some of the places where they just lease space and they don't own the whole data center to be able to customize it to fit their hardware.
It's an interesting concept, and by doing these modifications, you might actually see other companies outside of Facebook take it on now that it's
Yeah.
not so.
If they fit in standard racks, that'd be really awesome, but they don't.
Yeah. All right, well, I want to talk about a story that has bit me in the butt this week. If Jupiter Broadcasting shows are not meeting the quality level, you blame these guys, not me! Hands off here. Diago.
Well, not for TechSNAP, because I do all the work.
Well, yeah, not TechSNAP. No, that's Alan's fault if you don't like this episode. No. Diageo. I don't know how you say it, but they are an online bookmarking and note-taking and highlighting service. Have you ever seen one of our shows and I have highlights in the news article as I'm reading it? I'm using Diageo. I've used them for years. But they're going through some DNS hijacking right now. So if you use this service and you're getting weird error messages when you're trying to log in, stop. And don't go to their .com. Go to their .net address. So a little bit of a warning, because I know some of you folks out there in the past have asked me what I use, and I've told you. So I want to give you a bit of a warning for using it. I've noticed they've been having issues, and I was trying to do research last night, and I just wanted to highlight a few lines in this news article, and it's like, oh my.
Well, so basically what happened here is someone managed to get the username and password for their account for their domain registrar because they used Yahoo instead of GoDaddy. And so they basically have taken over control of the .com domain. Yeah. And what makes this worse is that all the bookmarklets that people have in their browser to use Digo or whatever it's called point to the .com. So you have to basically update all your bookmarklets to tag stuff through .net instead, so that you can still access the service until they manage to regain control of their domain name.
And the browser
it just goes to show when you buy a domain name, you need to make sure you use a secure password and a good email address for that, and that
and one that's current
password reset connection or password security questions that are good. And you pick a domain registrar that is going to be around and that has good policies and has proper systems in place for recovering your account, right? If they don't have secret questions and so on required to reset your password, then someone might be able to hijack your account by resetting your password and getting it.
Indeed. Alan, while we're on you, this next story I believe you tossed in the roundup. It's a follow-up to a story we've covered before.
Right. So the other week we talked about how some Chinese telco manufacturers like Huawei and ZTE or whatever it's called, were being blocked from bidding on projects in the US but also Australia, because Australia is building out their national broadband network and the Chinese manufacturer wants to bid on that. So to allay concerns from Australian authorities about their hardware, they're offering full access to their source code and their equipment so it can be audited before it's deployed.
How about that? So they're saying, no, really, it was just the stuff we had in there was an accident. Here's the code.
Well, in the U.S., the main fear is that the company is partly controlled by the Chinese government, and therefore they could replace the chips with ones with malware on them that would spy on U.S. internal networks or something. Right. So I don't know if the source code really solves that problem, but it's a step in the direction. So it might mean that if that's acceptable, that the Australian government will allow the Chinese company to bid on the national broadband network.
Gotcha. Well, this next story, the reason why I tagged it for the roundup is because we've talked about HP ProCurve switches before, and I think we've both mentioned we're fans of the ProCurve line. And I wondered if this might be related to them, although I'm not sure.
No. This is actually related to the previous story.
Oh, so really?
A researcher found some vulnerabilities in Huawei and H3T based network devices. Yeah. The H3T is a Chinese company owned by HP.
Okay.
It's separate from the HP products, but it's owned by HP. Basically, based on a talk at DEF CON last year or earlier this year, a researcher had extended that and basically found ways to completely take over routers built by these two Chinese manufacturers.
Okay.
And he published results through the US Search or whatever it is, the Computer Emergency Response Team. And as per the rules there, the vendors have 45 days to respond. And after that point, the researcher is allowed to publish the details since the vendor didn't respond. Right? That's how they force vendors to fix security flaws, by saying, you have 45 days before we tell everybody about this. Although the vendors can ask for an extension for extra time, but HP didn't. But then at the last minute, they called and left a voicemail and an email and were very sorry about the last minute nature of it and so on. And they asked the researcher to not publish his results yet, so they would have time to fix it.
Okay. Okay.
So basically had to cancel his talk, which is in like 2 days at a conference.
Jeez. Okay. Well, that'll be one to watch then.
Yeah. So there's definitely security problems with these two Chinese manufacturers' router. And I'm sure we'll see updates about that soon as the fixes come out.
Well, while we're on the topic, seems like a good chance to get scared about cyber war. And what do you do when you don't have a map?
Well, in this case, the U.S. is, continuing to reiterate its policy that if there is a cyber attack against the power grid or chemical plants or anything like that,
Our trains.
that they would retaliate.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're talking not just with regular warfare, but with cyber warfare of their own. But they don't have the systems or technology in place at this time to actually do that. So it's more like, if you attack us, we'll attack you back if we can figure out how.
Yeah.
And if we can figure out who it was that attacked us. Because, with cyber attacks, that's a big thing at this point, is there's not really a way to tell for sure who did it. Just because the IP addresses of the botnet that are attacking you happen to come from one place or another doesn't mean that's where the attack was being launched from.
Mm-hmm.
And most likely, cyber attacks against the U.S. are going to come from within the U.S. Infected consumer-level PCs in the U.S. are going to be what the attackers from
Leverage
either
those,
internal or external countries are going to use. Right? So, if you're Iran or China or Russia or whatever, and you're going to attack U.S. infrastructure, the easiest way to do it is with unpatched Windows machines.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there are plenty of those in the States that you can use.
Yeah.
And the advantage of doing that is, even if the States were to take the extreme measure of cutting off internet traffic from all external countries, the attack's still going to happen because it's coming from inside the U.S.
Right.
So it would be very hard for them to figure out who's attacking them. So I don't know how they're going to retaliate. The scarier thing is them retaliating against someone who didn't launch the attack.
Well, we seem like we often blame people who didn't launch the initial attack, and then we correct it. So that would be a hard part. They really have to...
Yeah. Somebody just suggested a new topic, Pearl Harbor, but spelled it as in Perl, the programming language.
Yeah, so interesting stuff. And I watch with a lot of trepidation where this is all headed. Because it's just getting, it's the way it's going.
Yep.
All right, Alan. Well, this is sort of
a little bit of good news on that front, though.
Yeah.
Obama failed to get his cybersecurity bill through the legislature, and had been planning to do a
executive order
about it. And there were some concerns with that, especially with the fact that it targeted things like social networks and PayPal.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just announced that the parts of the law about social networks and PayPal and eBay and so on are going to be removed.
And it sounds like in November they're gonna try to go the legislation route again, and then if that doesn't work, they're gonna do an executive order too. So it sounds like we're gonna get something, but it's kind of being declawed a little bit, huh? Why would you really?
Well, I don't see what social networks have to do with cybersecurity at all, anyway.
Yeah,
and that's why they shouldn't have been in there in the first place.
Unless it's about monitoring people.
Exactly, and in this case, it's.
Although you could see
there's enough concern that they're being like, oh, I guess we won't be spying on people.
But don't you think you could also see them making a case like, well, look, Anonymous posts up on here, and we have to be able to hunt them down because it's Anonymous that's doing this, and so we need access to that data. So
Anonymous can't even figure out who they are. So
but I could kind of see how they would use that as a reason why they need into social networking.
But it's the slippery slope.
The
whole point is that we don't do that. That's what makes the
civilized world, the civilized world?
Countries civilized. It's the fact that we don't take away everyone's rights just because there's a couple of bad people.
Well, at least that's how it used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the general idea, anyway.
Now, this next story, when I saw this, my jaw dropped a little bit. Not because it was actually all that bad, but just the concept of it being possible sort of scared me, especially as a CyanogenMod user.
Right. Well, this is basically a line of code that didn't get commented down.
Oopsies.
Yeah. So Cyanogen, which is a Android ROM, basically accidentally logged your swipe to unlock gestures.
Yeah.
Basically, in the newer version, they changed the code for swipe to unlock to allow you to have a larger grid or
more dot points.
More dots and kind of arbitrary dots.
Aha.
While they were developing that, they had a logging feature so that they could
test it,
figure out why the codes weren't working when they were supposed to, and so on. And they ended up forgetting to comment that line back out before they published the final version. So it meant that everybody's cyanogen phone was logging the swipe patterns as they made them. There's a fix out now, so the new version doesn't do that.
Yeah.
As long as no one has access to your phone to get the log file, it's not that big of a deal. But
and you know, we've actually
accidentally let debugging code slip out into production.
I think we can all remember we've actually seen worse things. We've seen some of the third-party like layers that go on top of Android do a lot worse. But you remember when the first G1 shipped, everything you typed went into the terminal. And so if you typed reboot, like in a text message, like I need to reboot this server, it would reboot your phone because it was all going echoed into a terminal as root. So we've seen a lot worse than this. But I just thought the concept, you know, I'm loading this ROM on my phone. I don't really know 100% if somebody's added something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's you know, the downside to these custom ROMs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I do love it. It's made my phone a lot more usable.
Yeah.
And I got,
and in fact, at EuroBSDCon, I met someone who had the only Migo phones that ever came out.
Oh, really? Did you get to play with it much?
A little bit. It looks really cool. I'm like, why don't they make more of these?
Yeah. Tell me about it. Tell me about it. Jeez,
but it's because, you know, Nokia got a new CEO that just ran it into the ground. But anyway.
Hey, Windows 8 comes out tomorrow, though. So there's that.
Yeah.
You never know.
Oh, the best quote ever. I didn't actually hear it when it was made, but I found it through Twitter. The best quote ever came out of EuroBSDCon last week.
Okay.
A computer without Windows is like a cake without mustard.
Wow. Well, there you go. I mean, well put. Well put. Now, Alan, I think that just brings us to the end of this week's show. Now, if we have any interesting Windows 8 news stories, we'll share them with you next week. You guys don't worry. But if you want to watch this show live, you can do so. Join us at jblive.tv, 1 p.m. Pacific, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
And you can also catch
that quote wasn't from McCusick, although McCusick made a couple of funnies. The best one, though, was when McCusick was drunk after the social event.
Yeah.
And there was 2 buses to take us back to the hotels.
Okay.
And he got on the wrong bus. And so Eric got out, and Eric Ullman, who's the inventor of syslog and sendmail, he was the opening keynote speaker, and Kirk McCusick, who invented the fast file system and Unix file system and soft updates and soft update journaling.
Wow, yeah.
All other, you know, basically they're like the grandfathers of BSD. So he gets on the right bus and he's like, yeah, that was a bus error.
Bus error. Ba-dum-bum.
Yeah.
That's a good one. All right. Well, so there you go. If you want to catch our hijinks, we encourage you to join us live because there's even more show. We take breaks between the segments and hang out with the chat room and all kinds of good stuff. So join us live at jblive.tv. But if you can't, we do make these shows available for download over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. Just tune in and find it every single Thursday late night, Friday morning, or you can just subscribe to the RSS feed and get it automatically.
And in a couple of weeks, when the videos from EuroBSDCon are published, we'll highlight a bunch of cool stuff.
Excellent. I look forward to that. We'll let people know. All right, Alan, well, thank you for a great show, sir. And, of course, thank you, everyone, for tuning to this week's episode of TechSNAP, and we'll see you right back here next week.